Next Curve.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Next Curve's Rethink Webcast podcast and our series From the Radio to the Rick, which we haven't done in quite some time. I don't know why. I'm Leonard Lee, Executive Analyst at Next Curve, and I'm joined by my very good radio head buddy, Earl Lum of EJL Wireless Research. Hey, how's it going, man?
It's going well, Leonard. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, it's been oddly a very long time since we've last chatted. I don't know why.
You've been busy.
Yeah. Oh no, actually, it hasn't been that long. MWC. It's just the year is going by really quickly. But in this episode, everyone, we're going to be talking about and recapping Mavenir's corporate update post recapitalization. So everyone probably heard the big news that they did get recapitalized. So congratulations to the folks at Mavenir, right? Nokia's Midsummer launch. And finally, we will cap things off with DTW Ignite 2025, which took place in Copenhagen, Denmark, where I suffered midsummer night insomnia. So before we get started, please remember to like, share, react, and comment on this episode. Also subscribe here on YouTube and Buzzsprout and listen to us on your favorite podcast platform. Opinions and statements by my guests, it doesn't matter how much I like Earl, their views are their own and don't reflect those of Next Curve or mine. And we're doing this to provide an open forum for discussion and debate on all things tech and radio and air interface and RF. So with that, how's it going? I think I already asked you that question.
It's going well. It's still been busy, even though wireless itself is in a lull. And there's still a lot going on with regards to updates on where things are going, not only in North America, but across the entire ecosystem. And
yeah,
it looks like, again, we're seeing new products coming out. And the question is when does the chatter surrounding 6G start to percolate and get louder and louder? I think we're going to start to see that by the end of this year. But in the meantime, OpenRAN is still chugging along. And
really? Okay, that's your take. We'll have to talk. I've been talking about OpenRAN Squid Game quite a bit lately, so
yes, absolutely. Well, maybe chugging along isn't the correct term to use, but it isn't dead.
No, though a lot of people
morphed dramatically, and I think everyone out there who thought it would go one direction has now seen it completely go in a different direction, and the leaders are still the incumbents.
Yeah. So let's dive into Mavenir corporate update post recapitalization. So what were some of your takes there? I mean, I didn't attend, so I have no idea, but I'm going to.
So basically, there was a lot of debt that was due, and something had to happen in order to fix that issue that was looming over the company since I guess Q3 or Q4 of last year. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't a small amount of debt. I think there was over $1 billion that was due. And I guess in terms of the creditors, everything got solved in a way that was happy for everyone, I believe, in terms of a debt to equity swap out or subordinate debt. So at this point, it looks like there's enough cash and there's not a huge looming payment. And going forward, the interest payments on the debt are going to be manageable for Mavenir. And one of the stipulations is from the companies that held the debt is you kind of not do radios going forward, or you drastically change the way you look at radios for the company going forward, and to revamp the strategy for the company into an area that it does fairly well, which is software.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone ever doubted their capabilities on the software side.
Mhm.
I think their hardware was actually pretty good. The problem was having someone buy it, which was extremely difficult. So I think the core, or not, no pun intended, but they're going to be focusing on the core. They'll be focusing on AI, obviously, because everyone's talking about it.
Yeah.
And this hopefully will allow them to get to a level of profitability quicker than the other strategy that they had prior to this, because they're not going to have the boat anchor of trying to manufacture the radios. With that said, I believe that they still have commitments that they're going to fulfill on whatever contracts they had. But I think they're going to be very laser focused, and there's also the potential that they're going to be doing some type of a shift towards an ODM model, or design services where obviously if you get paid NRE up front, then that's going to lessen the amount of capital costs and cash burn, which was the major issue for the radio group part of Mavenir. So they're not out of the radio business completely, but I think it's taken a different tack now going forward, where you have substantial IP.
Yeah, engineering and IP, right? Maybe like engineering support. And I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And you know, I think it's important for everyone to recall how the contributions that they have made into OpenRAN, just the whole ecosystem, enabling it, and their role as a catalyst. Now, I mean, I think the OpenRAN Squid Game turned out the way that you and I had kind of prognosticated. And the game has changed quite significantly, right?
Right. It goes back to January of 2023 when we first started talking about this. So it's been a couple of years, but a lot has changed. A lot has completely altered the ecosystem. And the question going forward now is, from a macro level, who's going to be left on the radio side? And I think that's important, because small cells, no diss on the people that are doing the small cells for OpenRAN, but that's really not where the money is. And the money is still on the macro side. So I think all of the existing or future want to be macro radio suppliers out there in the OpenRAN space really need to take a hard look at, again, I think it was over $500 million that got dumped into R&D or the radio group at Mavenir, cumulative. And that's just a drop in the bucket as to what Nokia and Ericsson and Huawei ZTE and Samsung spend every year for their R&D to make better and better radios.
So what else? What else did you take away from?
I think, again, the core side of it, in terms of where they're focused, obviously they're still going to be doing everything in IMS. I think as we go towards SA for 5G, there will be opportunities there. And on the AI side, it's really going to be time will tell in terms of how competitive and how much share they can gather, how quickly can they ramp up their AI strategy and get their solutions out there. And so there's a window for them right now for the next 5 years to achieve the strategy. And I think it's going to be a wait and see. And we'll get an update in November of this year when they have their next analyst meeting over in Dallas. But I think, again, at least the strategy now plays into the sweet spot of what they're good at, which is software.
Right. But, you know,
not that they weren't good at the radios.
Right. But it is interesting that they, in their OpenRAN Squid Game round one, or, you know, season one venture, they went full stack, you know, and they have full stack IP. And I think that could be a really interesting portfolio of assets that they can leverage going forward. So,
right. I mean, they're still going to have the software for the CUDU. So in addition to the core, so they'll still be participating in that side. And they've done okay in that area. It was just that the cash burn on the radio business was just immense, and it's is hard to sustain, which is why prior to the advent of OpenRAN, all of the third-party macro radio suppliers virtually went out of business because it was a bad business to be in, because you never got the volumes that the tier one incumbents got.
Yeah. Well, no, that's great. That's a great update. So thanks for sharing that. Now, what about Nokia's midsummer launch?
Midsummer launch. I guess the way I would summarize it is no new birds or winds or fans.
So you're happy.
It's all good.
Yeah.
I think the Reef Shark Silicon seems to be doing whatever it needs to be doing from Marvell and Broadcom. Mm-hmm. So the new hardware products that they launched, which is part of the Haybrock family for 32 and 64T, higher power, wider bandwidth. Again, not a surprise because that's what everyone's expecting. These are in particular, though, interesting in that they're geared towards multi-operator RAN sharing over in the European market. So the new radios are 400 watts, which means that each operator that would be sharing would be getting their 200 watts, which is what they wanted. And it has a operating bandwidth of up to 300 megahertz. So if one operator has more than 100, then the 300 will accommodate that, plus your traditional 80 to 100 megahertz that's typically divvied out over there in Europe in terms of the C-band spectrum. The interesting thing is that these dual-band radios are covering N41, which is at 2.6 gigahertz or 2.5, and also band 38, which is also in that spectrum. So we're looking at now what used to be LTE bands also being included into the radio with the C-band capability. And I think that points to really leveraging the spectrum that T-Mobile has in the US. Similarly, over there in Europe now, for all the operators that have had this TDD spectrum for a while and haven't really used it to the fullest extent that they could, and to maximize and to monetize that spectrum now using massive MIMO in these radios. And I would assume that Ericsson has similar products, if not out already, or that will be coming out as well.
Oh, cool! So I think you're turning your perspective and sentiment.
I am, and the perspective is that it looks like things are fixed on the hardware side, and again on the software. There is one other hardware product that is worth mentioning, which is the Integrated Passive Active Antenna Plus, or IPAA Plus. That is using a passive antenna with certain metamaterials technologies in it, and you're putting a massive MIMO radio behind it, and you're beaming through that passive antenna. So in a lot of situations where you have to save space when you're mounting all of the antennas, this is actually able to do that with one pole mount instead of having to do two, or instead of having to stack one unit on top of the other. So again, there are a lot of situations over in Europe where these products are being deployed, most notably in Denmark. Is one of the countries that is starting to deploy this technology. And I think Iceland is another country that's also deploying. And would expect it, and also France. Those are the three that I'm aware of at this point in time. But I'm sure there's more to continue as we move forward, just because rent space is money for the operator. And everyone's leasing now on a tower that they no longer own.
So this is all like brass tacks type of stuff, right?
The plumbing and the later one. I'm sorry?
No AI RAN, no.
Yeah, they did talk about AI for RAN, which is, I think, what everyone's talking about, except for maybe NVIDIA, who's talking about AI in RAN, but also a major upgrade on the Manta Ray network management software that they've had in terms of it being not only just SON, but moving to an SMO platform, which is, I think, very interesting because, again, the claims are that the Manta Ray SMO capability is the only one out there that meets TM Forum's level 4 for autonomous networks. And again, I think that's the direction I would expect the entire industry to be moving forwards in terms of their software approach and how they're doing the SMO. And it kind of tees up, whatever you saw out at the TM Forum at that you were at in Copenhagen.
Yeah, and that was like one of the big themes out of DTW. But one of the interesting things that I noticed in the Nokia approach toward SMO is that it's not OpenRAN first. In fact, they're working on the integrations or the interfaces that are ORAN compliant. So that I thought was telling. They didn't prioritize OpenRAN. And it makes a lot of sense because here's the thing. I wrote about this a long time ago and actually had very early conversations about the importance of something like a SMO with Tarek Amin, and who was at the time CTO of Rakuten Mobile. And we had this long conversation about brownfield integration, how Rakuten might be able to figure out a way to create these inroads into brownfield environments for their products and OpenRAN principles, right? And so you need to have some degree of critical mass forming, or at least some beachheads that you set up, and an SMO would be something that would be a great tool for that, but it would have to be sold at a much higher level than the RAN, right? And we had some interesting conversation, and Rakuten actually had an element or a component in their overall architecture that I think it was called the orchestrator, or the Rakuten orchestrator, or RCP. Remember the Rakuten communications platform? There was a layer there that was basically what we're talking about today in terms of SMO. But Ericsson came to market with their intelligent automation platform, and that took sort of this multi-vendor or multi-technology approach, right? And they were taking a bit of more of an OpenRAN-ish first type of angle to it, and I think that's shifted over time because of how OpenRAN has played out over the last 3-4 years, right?
Right. And I think on the Nokia Manta Ray, it's really has been originally focused on the purpose-built.
Right, purpose-built.
And then now adding the additional OpenRAN capabilities and interfaces and such. But I think obviously it's harder to do the SMO on a purpose-built because you really have to know what everyone's equipment is doing. And you don't have the luxury of those OpenRAN interfaces.
Well, they have the third-party integrations that they mentioned, or at least I saw mentioned. And so if we think about like edge-wise, so Qualcomm acquired Cellwise a couple of years ago, and they are one of the leading SMO solution providers, right? They have a legacy in SON, but that's one of the secret sauces that they bring to the table, or accelerators that they bring to the table, is a portfolio of these third-party integrations, right? So they've worked with all kinds of different kits, and so they have these adapters that you can leverage to I don't want to say plug and play, but they are there to help you accelerate any kind of integrations that you're trying to do across a multi-tech or multi-vendor portfolio. So yeah.
Right. And if OpenRAN doesn't play out the way that the OpenRAN industry had envisioned, this brownfield is going to be critical for you to get from where we are today to going forward to whatever that autonomous network is without the ability to have the OpenRAN interfaces if they don't get implemented.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why that was one of the reasons why I brought this up with Tarek a long time ago. And it was that integration layer that I always thought was absolutely important because, I think one of the problems with the OpenRAN movement was it assumed that all the operators just wanted to flip from the purpose-built to in traditional RAN to the open, right? And that was
right, without understanding the barriers of what it would take for them
transformation, right? And so, in my experience, it has always been in the IT environment. So, especially if you look at how the RAN and telco infrastructure is moving toward this more virtualized cloud, quote unquote, native architecture, those types of transitions, you always have to consider the brownfield dynamic and very carefully plan these transformations. And so having these kind of SMO-ish type of integration tools, those are the things that'll provide you that fast path to automation. And then whether or not you're OpenRAN or whatever underneath, you can achieve probably high value levels of autonomous capabilities. And it might not be holistic, but at least there's going to be certain aspects that you can automate with a certain degree of autonomy across the portfolio versus being constrained in silos. So it's kind of cool to see Nokia evolving their offering. But then, okay, so now speaking about DTW, that was one of the big takeaways that I had is SMO is really becoming that centerpiece and that first phase of autonomous network enablement, right? It's like the backbone.
Right.
And it was good and autonomous networks was absolutely the big theme. There was a huge focus on level 4 and what it takes to achieve level 4. I briefly spoke with Nokia about their SMO offering, but it didn't get down to the level where, and so maybe I need to have a follow. In fact, I am going to have a follow with them about how they're qualifying that they're the first level 4.
Exactly.
SMO. But I think a lot of folks are close. I mean, one of the things that we saw in the Catalyst there, or at least I saw at the Catalyst, and if you don't know what a Catalyst is, there are these POC programs that a TM Forum puts together, and they're friggin' awesome. I love them, right? You learn so much just going to each of the Catalysts and talking to the teams that are comprised of sponsors who are usually operators and the participants who are usually vendors and technology solution providers and GSIs or SIs, right? Systems integrators. You learn a lot from talking to them and getting some insights into the challenges that they had in delivering, and then what worked, what didn't, that type of thing, right? And so autonomous networks, huge. One of the things that I didn't see as prominent was all the customer experience stuff. I mean, it was there, but it was not as a big of a topic, right? So I think this whole idea of 5G monetization or monetization has been kind of pushed to the wayside a bit, or at least in the back burner a bit, simply because I don't think this big bet that some of the leading OSS, BSS vendors made on generative AI is actually playing out the way that they had hoped, right? And so this is one of the things that I had warned several of them about, and it turns out it is the case. I didn't see a lot of folks going around talking about how generative AI has transformed the customer experience in a revolutionary way, right? And so I think there's still a lot of work to be done there, but definitely a focus on the infrastructure, and it was really interesting.
So
really interesting
question. So are you seeing now the industry looking at this technology and what's been going on the AI side more inward in terms of what they can do for themselves? As opposed to, again, the customer experience that you didn't see there that would be more outward facing for the operator? And are they seeing that here's where the best bang for my buck is with regards to this technology is what do I do to help my own network get better, more efficient, and to have a better TCO, right?
Yeah. And using agentic frameworks. So what I mean by agentic frameworks are these really programmatic frameworks, right? That allow you to create these isolated, pretty highly controlled agents that are plugged into, let's say, a large language model or a reasoning model, leveraging these in getting to that next level of autonomy in network management, orchestration, and control. So there is that exploration going on. That's a lot of what you saw in the Catalyst. I would say that we're still a ways off. It's very exploratory at the moment. But one of the things that I think is a key learning that's coming out of the Catalyst is that you do need to full life cycle manage these things. And when you get into that conversation with these folks who are doing these innovations and POCs through the Catalyst programs, you realize a lot of that thinking has not gelled yet. It's still very nascent, and the industry is still exploring and discovering what the best practices are in terms of leveraging agentic frameworks and generative AI, right? And so anyone who goes out there and tells you that they've solved the problem or we're at a state of revolution, I will borrow the statement that the CISO of the Ford company made on stage at Cisco Live. Like, anyone who tells you that they have the solution is a liar. So yes, we are not, and so this is the disconnect, right? These are some of the ground truths that are surfacing through these POCs, which I think is fantastic. This is why I love these catalysts, right? Is that we're still very much in the discovery mode, and the limitations of this technology that I've written about for 2 years are starting to be realized. And so now this is the most fundamental learning that the industry needs to do. Once you understand what the limitations of the technology is, and granted, it continues to evolve quickly, then once you have that baseline understanding, you know what's possible, you can explore architectures and solution frameworks that have a higher probability of being viable, right? But more importantly, you're going to test these potential limitations. You're not going to discover them through random, ideation, right? And so there's ways to accelerate your POC and your discovery so that you can get to viable much quicker than I think industries have been doing over the past now going on 3 years with generative AI. So
if you looked at what was going on and the fact that the industry is being truthful about what's going on with these catalysts and what went well, what didn't go right, is there a sobering effect across the industry, or what was the tone that you saw over there at the event? Because if I go back to a decade ago plus, when the telecom industry was looking at network function virtualization and SDN and all of these things that the datacom guys were trying to port over, the first year was total excitement and joy, and by year 3 it went to despair, because the telco industry doesn't move in that direction and isn't going to adopt it. Or what they did was everyone adopted it vertically in their company, but there was no horizontal adoption. So it was still completely siloed in terms of the SDN NFV capabilities within an Ericsson or a Nokia, but they still didn't talk to each other and didn't have the interfaces. So it didn't play out like the industry had hoped. because they didn't really understand the telecom market.
Yeah.
Seeing something similar from what you experienced in Copenhagen, or is there still this optimism that they're going to solve the issues and continue to move forward, but be more realistic about what the limitations are, like you indicated?
Well, there's always fluff on top, right? There's always hypey themes, but when you see players like Ericsson, and props to the marketing team at Ericsson, come to the conference with the mindset of no BS, OSS, BSS. That's refreshing, right? And
it is.
I think is really what needs to happen. Is like, look, try to figure out the BS ahead of time so you don't have to be distracted. That's another word that came up several times at the conference. We are too distracted. I said, yeah, you are. You're way distracted. You're getting excited about a technology where in order to realize these aspirational capabilities and outcomes, you need to get your stuff in order, right? And most telcos don't have the readiness to do all this like science fiction, autonomous XYZ, with agentic AI and all this other stuff. They don't. And then the vendors don't know how to get their clients there. Okay. That is a fact. And then again, going back to, the CISO of the Ford Motor Company, if anyone tells you that, they're a liar. So be less distracted, like Mats Carlson, who is the head of BSS OSS at Ericsson. He said, we need to focus on AI that is practical and works and less of the hype stuff. And that's absolutely true, right? Because there's so much work that has to be done with AI to make it work and yield the kind of ROIs that everybody is theorizing about. But we're far away from that. And so it's good to see that there is some leadership there. And it's not just Ericsson. There's other companies as well as operators that are starting to narrow the aperture of the hype discussions toward more focused things. And again, I didn't hear monetization as much. I'm sure that there were some sessions about it, but in terms of like being on the floor, talking to folks, there was much less talk about monetization, but more of modernization, which is something that I'd been advocating for the industry for, a few years now. That I think is becoming that realization that the industry itself doesn't really have an appetite for hype stuff. And going through the discovery process they are with generative AI and, agentic AI, there's going to be scrutiny and prioritization toward the practical and what's actually going to move the ball.
Right.
That's what we really need. And that's an encouraging thing.
Right. I think essentially what you're talking about is this M&M strategy of modernization and then monetization.
Yeah. But you also need to be able to enable that full stack, like something that I had done some work with Amdocs on and positioning for MWC a couple of years ago, is this whole idea of full stack modernization. So going from the network management level all the way on up to customer experience. And, the idea that you do need to have that capable revenue engine, right? Or CPQ that enables you to be able to monetize a service that you imagine. Because one of the things that folks may not realize, except for real practitioners that are deep into, front office operations and the financial operations of a telco, if you can't set up your systems to bill a customer for a particular service that you've designed, you can't monetize. It becomes becomes cost prohibitive. Your CFO is going to basically ex-nay it. And so the conversation around monetization requires you to have this full stack of capabilities that are aligned with the maturity that you are realizing from the network on up, right? So the stack has to be enabled. You can have like a completely modernized network and your operational stack is not. You just simply can't monetize the way that you might have imagined.
So which would come first then, if we're talking about this in terms of the modernization and this trend for a lot of the operators that started in 5G with NSA and now are moving to SA? Do they need to go to SA first, or do they need to fix the BSS, OSS first, or does it need to happen in parallel? Or what would the operators need to do to have both of those fixed in order to get to this monetization level?
Yeah, I think so. I think they have to modernize their BSS and then OSS, really being informed by network maturity and the requirements in terms of and the required capabilities for service delivery and service composition or design, right? Because depending on the complexity of what you want to deliver to your customer, could require OSS capabilities that you might not have traditionally. So, I mean, these are all things that you have to consider as you look at your roadmap, your transformation roadmap. But full stack modernization, there has to be some orchestration and planning on how you do that.
Right. I guess if the operator community is being told that to monetize, I need to move to SA so I can do my slicing and dicing and everything else, I also need to obviously have the ability to deliver that service to that.
Go for it. Yeah. Deliver it.
So
deliver it. Yeah.
If I'm doing that core, I need to do both of them simultaneously, which adds to the complexity now of upgrading and adding the 5G core on the SA side, in addition to doing this BSS, OSS modernization as well, right?
Yeah. And so, going back to my earlier comment about the complexity, that's what network slicing and what Ericsson calls differentiated connectivity-based services, that's the complexity that gets introduced. So you do have to ask yourself, can you build for that stuff?
Right. I mean, technology-wise, I can enable that slice. I just do whatever on the core.
Commercially,
able to do that. But then how do you build for that slice you just easily enable to that customer becomes now the gating problem.
Yeah. So anyways, DTW, loved it. So glad that I went. Didn't get a lot of sleep, but wonderful conference. So anyway, I think that's all we have time for, right?
Yes. Time's up.
Cool.
Good chat.
All right. Yeah. Great chat. Thanks everyone for hanging out as long as you have. Remember to reach out to Earl at www.ejlwireless.com and connect with him on LinkedIn. Contact him to get a hold of his reports as well as his advisory services. He's one of the leading guys in the space. So also, please subscribe to the Next Curve YouTube channel. And the easiest thing to do is subscribe to the Next Curve Research Portal and Media Center at www.next-curve.com for a constant diet of the tech and industry insights that matter. And we'll see you next time.